Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Township of Scotch Plains and happy holidays to everyone. Before we begin, it's not all that common to have the governor, Senate President, and Assembly Speaker on his way, I understand, together at the Scotch Plains Public Library. And I know you're not here to return books. Please allow me a moment to thank each of you for supporting the $4 million grant towards construction of a new Scotch Plains library. Our entire community is excited to move this project forward, and it couldn't have been done without the state's generous support. I look forward to inviting each of you to the groundbreaking down the road. We are gathered here today because Governor Phil Murphy recognized that it was important for New Jersey to respond to the United States Supreme Court's Bruen decision, which held that New York's law requiring a license to carry concealed weapons in public places is unconstitutional. Governor Murphy, Senate President Nick Scutari, Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin, and every legislator that supported this legislation recognized that firearm restrictions are, in fact, necessary, and that reasonable restrictions make communities like Scotch Plains and cities like Newark safer. Thank you all for being here today. I would like to recognize the elected officials that are here and ask forgiveness if I miss anyone. President Nick Scutari, Union County Board of Commissioners Chair Rebecca Williams, Assemblywoman Linda Carter, Assemblywoman Mila Jayzee, Attorney General Matt Platkin, Assemblywoman Ellen Park, Assemblyman John McKeon, Assemblyman Joe Danielson, and my colleague, Councilman Matt Adams. And now, Governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning. Actually, I'm at the Scotch Plains Library every Thursday morning, so thank you all for coming out and joining me on this Thursday. Thank you, Josh, for welcoming us so graciously to the Scotch Plains Public Library this morning. More on that in a moment. A couple of things that are off topic, if you can bear with me. Number one is we lost Franco Harris, who was a Jersey guy. Born at Fort Dix, he went to Mount Holly High, played ball there, ultimately, obviously, to Penn State and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And ironically, his number was going to be retired this Saturday night. Can you believe that? So keep him and his family in your prayers. And then a little bit more closer to home, I want to make sure that everybody is prepared for what will be a very challenging next few days weather-wise. So starting later today, we are expected to be hit by some heavy rains and strong winds. Rain totals will vary statewide, but some areas may get up to 3 inches. And while the winds have the potential to top out even as high as 40 to 50 miles an hour, even inland. And once the rain exits tomorrow at some point, probably in the afternoon, a dangerous cold front will enter the picture, taking temperatures well below freezing in short order and keeping them there through the weekend. And this is going to be a statewide weather event. There's a chance there could be a little bit of snow in the upper northwest reaches of the state, but this is overwhelmingly rain, wind, freezing. So if you need to venture out, please take extreme caution. Road conditions will be less than ideal, with the potential for ponding and flooding, followed by freezing, and the winds may be enough to take down trees or power lines. If you do lose power, please immediately call the Blackout Inn to your electric provider. Just remain mindful that while our electric utilities will try to restore power as quickly as possible, weather conditions at any given moment may prevent crews from getting up in a bucket safely, and that's especially the case with high winds. If you lose heat and you need a safe place to stay, please call 211 or visit nj211.org to find a warming center closest to you. We'll keep everybody informed of the latest through the State Police Office of Emergency Management at ready.nj.gov and ReadyNJ on social media, and we'll mirror that information on other official state social media channels, including at NJGov on Twitter. God bless them over at Twitter. So we'll leave it at that. Now moving on to why we're here together today. Since 1968, I believe, Josh, this building has been a place where residents could lose themselves in a book and perhaps in doing so escape the real world for a little while. The public library, whether here in Scotch Plains or anywhere in our state, has long been an island of safety for so many. And today, we're going to ensure that remains the case. And so many other places where our residents expect safety and security from senseless gun violence, that all those places remain just that. With me are a cast of luminaries. Josh has already alluded to many of them, the Attorney General, the Senate President. I think he was promoted to President of the United States in your introduction, Josh. Mr. President. The Speaker, who's not with us but is coming, Senator Linda Greenstein, I wanted to give a shout out, wanted to be here and could not. To all the other members of the legislature, Union County officials, and your council colleagues. I want to give a particular shout out to Joe Danielson, who has been on the back channel with me throughout this process, and to each of you and your colleagues, Joe, both in the Senate and in the Assembly, I say thank you. We are also going to hear from the co-lead of the New Jersey chapter of Moms Demand Action, Shani Knuckles. Shani, great to have you with us. Teresa Turner is in the audience, and I'm also deeply honored to be joined by Adam Skaggs, Chief Counsel at Giffords. Gabby Giffords remains an inspiration to so many of us, and Adam and the team at Giffords have been invaluable in their partnership. 6 months ago, the right-wing majority, which currently controls, sadly, the United States Supreme Court, in a tragic and misguided decision, invalidated both our long-standing and common-sense laws restricting the right to carry in public to those who had a justifiable need to do so. For many decades, there was a broad consensus that these restrictions were necessary steps to keep our public spaces safe and were fully consistent with the Second Amendment. Then 6 Supreme Court justices upended literally centuries of jurisprudence and ruled that states like New Jersey can no longer take these steps to protect their residents. But as I vowed, within 24 hours after that awful decision, there are still actions that we can take. And while we are bound to follow the Supreme Court's ruling, we are also obligated to do everything we can, consistent with that ruling, to ensure that guns do not necessarily proliferate in our communities. Doing nothing and blindly allowing concealed weapons into every corner of our communities does not make us safer. And it does not make our police safer as they do their jobs. In a nation already awash in too many guns, police responding to an emergency shouldn't have to stop to ask armed individuals which one of them is the good guy and which is the bad guy. Speaker Craig Coughlin, let's hear it for the Speaker. So I am proud to join with everyone today to sign a new and common sense law which adheres to the Supreme Court's decision while keeping guns out of the wrong hands and out of places where they simply do not belong. I was proud to announce this proposal back in June and was even prouder to partner with the Senate President and Speaker and with the law's sponsors, the aforementioned Assemblyman Joe Danielson, Majority Leader Lou Greenwald, Assemblywoman Ellen Park, Assemblywoman Mila Jacey, and Assemblywoman Annette Shapiro, as well as Assemblyman John McKeon and Senator Linda Greenstein, and co-sponsor Senator Gordon Johnson, to get this bill through the legislature. Our law recognizes the right as put forward by the Supreme Court of all law-abiding gun owners to carry a concealed weapon. Those 4 words, law-abiding gun owner, are key. So our law will build upon our existing restrictions and prevent anyone who should not have access to a gun in the first place from getting a concealed carry license, including those who have been convicted of a felony, who are subject to domestic violence restraining orders, who suffer from mental illness, which may pose a threat to others, those who are wanted in other states for criminal acts, and those who have stated a desire to get a weapon to do harm, to give you a few examples. And we will require those who are licensed to carry a concealed weapon to be trained in the safe carriage, handling, and storing of that weapon, and that they are properly insured against any harm done through the use of that weapon. We know that most gun owners don't ascribe to the views of some of the hard-right, extremist, and loudest voices in this debate. They understand that our rights, including the right of gun ownership, also come with serious responsibilities. But we must go further and also place common sense limits on where these weapons can and cannot be carried. I'm not going to list all out of those places in the interest of time, but I do want to highlight a few. They include our schools and institutions of higher education, places where our residents vote and where our government bodies meet, child care centers, hospitals, and long-term care facilities, where, by the way, some of our most vulnerable residents may be found, bars and restaurants where alcohol is served, and movie theaters and other entertainment venues, among others. And by the way, it includes our libraries and museums. It includes our stadiums and arenas. And in this, I would point anyone to the September 22nd brawl at MetLife Stadium between Jets and Ravens fans and ask how that situation would have been made any better had one of those people been armed. And our law makes clear that you cannot bring your gun into someone else's private property unless they have given their consent, either individually or through a sign posted on the premises. This applies to all private property, whether it is a shopping mall, a supermarket, or a home. And it includes houses of worship. We are not going to put the burden on ordinary New Jerseyans to have to tell someone visiting their home or business, be it a repair person or a neighbor, that they don't want firearms on their property every time someone visits. If you want to allow people to carry guns into your home or store, that should be your prerogative, and the law respects the right of a property owner to make that decision. This rule protects homeowners and businesses and allows them to decide how best to keep their property, their families, and their businesses safe. And I'm also proud that this law accomplishes something which I have long fought for, an increase in the fees charged for a permit to purchase a handgun. We are increasing the handgun permit application to $25 from the $2 mark that it has sat since 1966. And I might add, as a dog owner, and at long last, it is no longer cheaper to get a permit to purchase a handgun than it is to get a dog license. Now, we know the gun lobby and its acolytes are already preparing to take us to court to block these common sense measures. The Attorney General and his team are fully prepared to forcefully defend the constitutionality of this law. And even if any part of the law is successfully challenged, the rest of it would remain intact and enforceable. My most sacred responsibility as governor is protecting the welfare of all 9.3 million people who proudly call our state home. This responsibility includes doing all that I can to protect our residents from senseless gun violence and to help law enforcement in keeping our communities safe. There are many legislators, gun safety advocates, from Giffords to Everytown to Brady, who's all here, and so many others at the community level, and yes, law-abiding gun owners who stand with us, and I thank them all for their partnership. New Jersey has long ranked among the states with the nation's lowest rates of gun violence. We have earned this ranking not because we allow for unlimited guns on our streets and in our community spaces, but because we have taken smart actions that respect the Second Amendment on the one hand and protect the rights of law-abiding gun owners on the other, yet keep guns out of the wrong hands and out of places where they simply don't belong. So the question, I think, is what kind of state do we want to be? Do we want to be like Mississippi or Alabama, whose firearm death rates are nearly 5 times ours? Or do we want to remain a state where people can actually be and feel safe? This law ensures that no matter what Washington might throw at us, we will keep doing everything we can to ensure the safety of our citizens. I wish, frankly, that I never had to sign this measure, but this is the moment in which we find ourselves, so I will be proud to do so. But before I do, we need to hear from a few other outstanding leaders, starting with our outstanding Attorney General, who is leading our fight for gun safety and so many fronts. Please help me welcome Matt Black.
Thank you, Governor. I was listening to your weather report. As a Jets fan, I think the weather helps us tonight, so we'll see what happens. But thank you for convening this to legislative leadership. Thank you for your leadership here. To all the legislators, Mayor, thank you for hosting us. And Governor, thank you not just for bringing us here today, but for being a tireless champion for gun violence prevention efforts in this state. We know gun violence is an epidemic, and we know the cost of that epidemic. And I see it personally in my role as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer. I spend far more time than I'd like meeting with victims of gun violence, hugging parents of children who are never coming home, praying bedside with law enforcement officers' parents who have been shot in the line of duty. We know what the cost of this epidemic is. And as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, I also know what keeps us safe. And the work that the governor and the legislature have done consistently over the past now 5 years has kept us safer. And you don't have to just take my word for that. The numbers bear it out. In New Jersey today, shootings are down this year 23% across the state. That's because of, not in spite of, our strong gun safety laws. And it's also because of the strong work of our office, the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force that we've stood up, and the work of our law enforcement officers, all 38,000 across the state, who are doing incredible work to combat this epidemic. And so we know that it's working. By the way, it's working in every city. Every single city of size in this state is down double-digit % year over year. Down the road in Elizabeth, they're down 40% this year, shootings. So I want to thank the legislature, all the legislators who are here, and the governor for once again taking a bold action that is going to keep our residents safe. And that is my first and foremost priority, and I know it's theirs. And so just think about what this bill does for a minute. You know, we all gathered after the Bruen decision, and we have our views on that. We're obligated to follow it. But nothing in that decision and nothing under the Second Amendment prevents us from doing what the legislature and the governor are doing today. These steps are common sense, and they're entirely consistent with the Second Amendment. Saying that you can't bring a concealed firearm into a school or a daycare, like the school that I dropped my son off at this morning, is common sense, and it's entirely consistent with the Second Amendment. Saying that you can't bring a firearm into a hospital or an addiction treatment center or other places where people go when they're vulnerable and when they're sick is common sense, and it's consistent with the Second Amendment. And saying that if you want to call a plumber, that for them to come into your house with a firearm tucked under their belt, you have to tell them that's okay. That's common sense, and that's consistent with the Second Amendment. And I also want to highlight one thing that the governor said. This bill also makes law enforcement safer. Because when a barroom fight happens and someone reaches to their hip and pulls out a gun, as happens in other states that have more concealed carry than we previously had, or when a road rage incident turns violent, who gets caught in the middle of it? Somebody in blue. And so that's why I'm proud that they have also been strong supporters as we've worked through this bill. And so I want to thank every single person who worked on this bill. I want to thank again the legislature, the governor, and all the folks in our office and our department and chief counsel who have worked tirelessly over the past 6 months to put forth what I believe is a really strong bill, what I believe is an entirely constitutional bill, and one that will make our state safer. And I'll just say, if a challenge comes, we are more than ready to defend it. So thank you.
Well said, Matt, and thank you for your leadership. I also want to give Lindsay Rotolo, who's well known to Union County, is with us, your right-hand person, and Chief Counsel Paramel Garg, who worked tirelessly on this as well. Thank you, Matt. So I may have a good idea, I may believe something passionately, but it takes a village. Without great leadership in the legislature, today does not happen. And let's hear from a couple of those great leaders. First up, Union County's own Senate President Nick Scutari.
Thank you, Governor. I want to highlight one of the things that I thought is reflective in the importance that I thought about when this subject first came up and the decision in the Supreme Court needed to be met with legislative action. I decided, and with consultation with the Speaker, I was going to put my own name on this bill because I thought the importance of this bill getting through the legislature could not be matched. So I became the prime sponsor in the Senate chamber on it. And I'll tell you this, and people, sometimes there's jokes about the legislative process and making sausage, but this bill was done in a fashion that we can all be proud of. There was tireless debate, there was discussions with sponsors, there was discussions with interest groups, there was discussions with the Speaker and I, there was discussions with the sponsors together, and the administration and the Attorney General's office, and we came to what I think is an outstanding piece of legislation. Not without its complexities, not without its nuances, but certainly a piece of legislation that I believe we can all be proud of, not just for what we accomplished, but even in the way that we actually did it. The steps that we're taking throughout this process, I think, really brought people together in what we thought and what we believe, and the governor's about to sign, an outstanding piece of legislation that's going to help people be safer in New Jersey as we move forward into the future. I look at the New Jersey that I grew up in. I did not grow up in a New Jersey where people were carrying guns on their hips and walking into the Starbucks to get a coffee in the morning. And one of the things that we're particularly proud of is the outstanding support that our law enforcement groups have given us to this bill, because that's vitally important. I felt that was extraordinarily important because originally we weren't so sure, but they believed that the legislation that we ultimately brought to the governor's office was the right piece of legislation, struck the right balance. And as the governor mentioned earlier, more guns in a situation doesn't usually make it better. And they're just fraught with so much peril. And people that are waiting in line to get a carrier permit in New Jersey, I don't think that they understand the responsibility that comes with carrying a firearm. And it's an extraordinary amount of responsibility. That's why we only let professional law enforcement officers carry them, because they go through tremendous amounts of screening and training in order to have that. And even occasionally, they're not getting every position right on when it comes to guns. And to have some citizen that witnesses something and believes that they're going to save the day, and you'll probably hear a story like that once in our lifetime where someone did something that wouldn't have happened, but there are just so many other potentials for catastrophe when guns are entered into particular situations. I mean, I see car accidents every single day. What do you think is going to happen if everybody's carrying around a gun and lending them into those situations? So I don't come to this with not having experience. And I grew up in the Boy Scouts of America. I learned a healthy dose of respect for guns. I learned how to shoot guns. I was a gun owner and was a prosecutor for many, many years. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't leave it to the professionals, quite frankly. And that's not to go askew of the Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court specifically stated in that decision that states could put on restrictions. They could restrict specific areas. I never saw that in the Constitution either, but they said that we could do that, and that's what this bill does. It makes sure that specific areas are exempt from guns under almost all circumstances. So the widespread support that we were able to get for this bill, I think, was in response to the work that we put into it. Working with Speaker Coughlin and his House and my leaders and with Assemblyman Danielson, we put together what I think is a really responsible piece of legislation that respects the Second Amendment. It is a totally different situation to have a gun in your house than to have a gun on your hip and be out and about throughout your day. Completely different, I believe. And this bill, I think, strikes the right balance. It adds in additional safeguards. It gives law enforcement's complete and total support, and I believe that all the interest groups that had their opportunity to weigh in also felt the same way. So with that, I just want to say, Governor, we've delivered you a very good piece of legislation. I'm very proud that you're going to sign it here in Scotch Plains, one of my home district and one of my hometowns. And I appreciate the mayor hosting us today and all the people that had a role to play in this. You did a great job. You should congratulate yourselves. I'm proud of what we did today. Thank you, everyone.
Nick, really well said, really well done, and hats off to you and your colleagues. And we got one more. It not only takes the legislature, it takes two chambers in the legislature. Please help me welcome another great leader, the Speaker of the General Assembly, Craig Coughlin.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, Mayor. Thanks for welcoming us. Thanks for hosting us in the beautiful community of Scotch Plains. And thanks, everybody, for coming out. I want to especially take a few minutes to recognize my colleagues in the Assembly who are here. Linda Carter is here from Plainfield. Joe Danielson, we'll talk about him in a second, who's the sponsor of the bill, and Ellen Park, who also one of the prime sponsors. I don't think he's here. Who else is here? Oh, Mila Jacey. I'm sorry, I apologize. Mila Jacey from Essex County, and Lou Greenwald is not here, I don't think, but he's been somebody who's been a leader in the fight to make sane, sensible gun laws for the benefit of all of us. And I think that's what is at the heart of what we have done, what we're doing here today. Recognizing and respecting the Bruen decision and doing what we have done, I think, so well and so effectively under Governor Murphy's leadership, under the support for folks like Moms Against Demand Action with the Senate President, and that is to create laws that are going to protect the 9.3 million people in a safe, sound, respectful way. You know, I heard the Attorney General talk about common sense, and that really is what is at the essence of what we're doing here. When the Bruen decision came down, we recognized that the system they had in place, which I think, quite frankly, worked pretty darn well. If you demonstrated a need to have a concealed carry, you're able to get it in New Jersey. And that got turned upside down and has created the situation which could severely impact the safety that all of us have come to expect and appreciate in the state of New Jersey. And so we went to work. And I have my friend Joe Danielson is a gun owner in his own right, and somebody who is a voice for making sure that we do sane, sensible gun regulations when we're doing them, and we've done a number of them, something we all ought to be really proud of. When Joe came to me and said, Craig, I want to be able to sponsor this bill because it is so important, because I recognize how critical it is that we do this, we get it right, and that we make sure that the people of New Jersey continue to have that kind of safe and secure feeling that they deserve. So, Joe, I appreciate that. It was a position that I think many of your colleagues might have thought you might not take, but the truth of the matter is you were first in line to volunteer. Let's have a round of applause for my friend Joe. And as we all know, this makes sense because more guns equal more gun violence. It's just plain and simple as can be. And so today, we enact what we think are very solid and fair regulations about things that I think if we gave New Jerseyans a blank piece of paper and we said, write down where you think you ought to be able to not have to worry about whether somebody's carrying a gun, you'd look at a lot of the things that are reflected in this legislation, right? We don't expect when we're going to go to the beach that we need to be prepared to have somebody there. Heaven forbid we envision this, the visual of a guy in a Speedo with a concealed carry weapon. Beyond that, and as you point out, like when all hell breaks out, they don't say time out. look, you get a good guy T-shirt, you get a bad guy T-shirt, so that when the police arrive, we recognize who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. It creates a preposterously dangerous situation, and this will change with today's law. This is a triumph for people who care about the well-being of the people of the state of New Jersey, who appreciate that we can do good legislation that stands up and protects the Second Amendment right, and yet protects the people of New Jersey. And so there's a lot of champions in here. First and foremost, Governor Murphy, thank you for your leadership on this from day one of your governorship. You have been at the forefront of standing up for the people of New Jersey, and you deserve a big round of applause for that. The Attorney General who's taken the lead in fighting this fight. Congratulations, Maggie. I'm sure you're going to have more work to do. We're going to win that one, too. To my colleague and friend, Senate President Scutari, who got on the phone, he and I worked over weekends. He was incredibly instrumental in getting the police on board and doing that. To my colleagues in the Senate and in the Assembly who got this bill through the House, and it was, as many of you know, it was an awful long debate in the Assembly that went about getting this bill done, but we were unwavering, and Joe was somebody who stood up and met the challenge. So he's got a big smile on his face because he remembers it fondly, I guess. I had to remember. But so, and for all of you who have been at the forefront of the fight to stand up and say, no, we can do better. We're better as a state. We're better off when we don't have to worry about everyone carrying a gun, willy-nilly. That there can be real training. There can be mechanisms to protect the people that make sense, that are common sense, that all of us can understand and get around, and that will make the state of New Jersey safer. So to everybody here, to my friend Bill Kastner, I don't know if he's here, I didn't see him, but he's been at the heart of this. And I do want to especially thank the PBA, the state police, and the retired officers who worked with us because they understand that this is better for their members, that we're all safer because of it, and made sure that we got the bill right to get things done. So to all of you, thank you. Have a wonderful holiday season. Everybody who's celebrating. This is one of the things that's going to make this a happy new year. So thank you all for coming out. It's a privilege to be with you today.
Craig, that was really well done and said. Two quickies. The Bruen decision, I think you said it right. We don't like it, but it's the law. So we now have to, as much as we may not like it, we have to deal with it. And this law will do that in a way that both respects the decision, but also makes those common sense steps. And secondly, I'm still getting stuck on the guy on the Speedo with the gun. It's going to take me some time to digest that, but
Just don't think about it.
I'll try not to think about it. I mentioned him earlier. He's the Chief Counsel and Policy Director at the Giffords Law Center. Giffords is one of several incredibly important organizations with us today. Brady is in the house, moms are in the house, but these folks do great work. Please help me welcome Adam Skaggs.
It's a hard act to follow the Speedo with the gun. But as someone who grew up not far from here, admittedly in Morris County, not Union County, but not far, but as a native of the great state of New Jersey, it's an honor to stand here today with these courageous leaders who know that the number one priority for any public servant is protecting the safety of that public. So on behalf of myself, my family that still lives here in the state of New Jersey, and my organization, Giffords, I want to applaud Governor Murphy, Attorney General Platkin, Senate President Scutari, Speaker Coughlin, all of their colleagues in the legislature, and I want to extend our profound gratitude for getting this legislation across the finish line and for their leadership. We're here because these leaders and all New Jersey residents were put at risk by a dangerous decision, as we've heard, from the radical, ultra-conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court. That decision struck down the more than 100-year-old tradition that states like New Jersey have relied on to regulate guns in public and keep the public safe. It's no wonder, as we've heard already this morning, that given New Jersey's long history of responsible gun regulation and nation-leading strong gun laws even today, New Jersey's rate of gun violence is among the lowest in the country. And to be sure, the Bruen decision from the Supreme Court has threatened that success. As we've heard, study after study shows that the more permissive a state's approach to concealed carry, to guns in public, the more violent crime, the more gun injuries, and the more gun deaths. So the stakes were absolutely high after the Bruen decision came down. But these courageous leaders have risen and they have met the moment. For that, we should all be grateful. And they've done so by passing and very soon signing legislation that, as we've heard, is fully consistent with the Bruen decision. Both Justice Thomas's majority opinion and the concurrences make explicitly clear that states are not prohibited from requiring permits before people are permitted to carry guns in public, and that they can impose real standards for training, eligibility, fingerprinting, background checks, and all of those. Look it up in the opinion. It's footnote 9 in the majority opinion. It's the very first point that Justice Kavanaugh makes in his concurrence, joined by the Chief Justice. And that is exactly what this legislation does. It strengthens New Jersey's permitting standards and procedures, and it's going to make this state a safer place to live. The Bruen decision also makes clear that guns can be prohibited, and throughout American history have been prohibited, in sensitive places. And I very much appreciate the work of the legislature to really fine-tune and focus that list of sensitive places and to prohibit guns in the places we've already heard this morning where they will no longer be permitted to be carried. There are a lot of other pieces, important pieces of this legislation. We've heard some of them already. I'm not going to give a laundry list in the interest of time. So I just want to conclude instead by acknowledging what I think is probably inevitable. Lawsuits are likely to follow. They followed any time the legislature has passed strong gun laws in the past. There's no reason to expect that this will be different. In the words of the mayor of San Jose, California, Sam Liccardo, in the New York Times, some of you may have seen, when it comes to guns, no good deed goes unlitigated. So lawsuits are going to follow. But this legislation has been narrowly and carefully crafted to be consistent with the Second Amendment, to be consistent with the Bruen decision. And I know that Attorney General Platkin and his very talented colleagues will defend these laws. Whatever litigation comes, they will rise to meet the challenge, and they will ably and very capably defend them. And on behalf of the Giffords organization, I'll say we will be there at every step of the way to offer any support and all the support that we can as they defend this critical life-saving legislation. Because ultimately, really, there's no choice. The lives of the residents of New Jersey and the safety of New Jersey families and communities are at stake here. So thank you again for your leadership. Thank you for the opportunity to share our gratitude today to all the folks who have worked, the village that has gotten this legislation done. Really appreciate the opportunity to have spoken here today. Thank you.
Rumor has it, Adam, that you went to the same high school as Matt Plotkin. Is that right?
Just a few years earlier.
Okay. Thank you so much for your leadership. I believe it's your latest report card. We're proud to have been one of only 2 states that I think got an A grade. So the moms are with us, right? Even Pringle's got a red T-shirt on today back there. And as Brady has been, as Giffords have been, they've been with us at every single step of the way. Now almost 5 years into this administration, working with the legislators, working with our offices, the Attorney General, to make this state as safe as possible. Please help me welcome the Moms Demand Action New Jersey chapter leader, the aforementioned Shani Nichols.
Hi, everybody. In addition to being one of the leaders of the best grassroots organization that I've ever run across, I'm also the proud mother of 2 boys, Jack and Alex. My husband, Mike, and I moved to New Jersey almost 20 years ago because we knew it would be a good place to raise our family. 2 decades later, I am reassured of that sentiment because despite the dangers created by the Supreme Court's decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which impacted New Jersey's strong concealed carry permitting law, our lawmakers have demonstrated a commitment to live out their oath, to prioritize our sense of safety and well-being above anything else. On behalf of the thousands of Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action volunteers and gun violence survivors who make up our statewide organization, I want to thank the New Jersey legislature for passing this life-saving bill, and Governor Murphy, a true gun sense governor, for signing it into law. Today we are safer because our lawmakers have kept guns out of places where guns should not be carried, places like daycare centers, playgrounds, and other places where our children gather, bars and restaurants that serve alcohol, public demonstrations and rallies, polling places, and courthouses. The day after the dangerous Supreme Court Bruin decision, I remember, Governor Murphy, you called us all to Trenton. We were feeling scared as this decision took away our freedom to feel safe in places like our parks, on our train rides to work, and when we were at the ballot box. And you promised us that you and the New Jersey legislature would get to work right away on preserving our public spaces and our sense of security, and that's exactly what you did. In the wake of that meeting, the New Jersey legislature wasted no time in drafting this bill, and moms volunteers were grateful for your partnership throughout the process. We didn't take our foot off the gas to get this bill across the finish line. For the past several months, New Jersey moms testified at hearings at both the New Jersey Assembly and Senate. We sent over 1,200 emails to lawmakers advocating for this bill, and we never missed a vote. Make no mistake, we were not going to stand idly by when radical judges struck down common sense gun laws at the behest of gun extremists. Rather, our grassroots movement will always show up ready to work with lawmakers to pass gun safety laws that will save lives. We do this work because it's vitally important that our lawmakers prioritize our lives and our safety. We do this work in honor of those among us who know all too well the devastating toll that gun violence has on New Jersey families, our loved ones, and too often our children. Today, Governor Murphy, we are proud to stand alongside you, state lawmakers, and fellow gun safety advocates to sign this bill into law. Thank you.
Jenny, thank you so much for those words and for your leadership and for all, not just the moms with us today, but the other advocates who are with us. I promised our son, Charlie, who's 21 years old, over 5 years ago, that if I'm speaking in a library, before I sign this bill, I have to tell his favorite library joke. Kid goes into the library, walks up to the librarian and says, "I'll have a large Coke, a quarter pounder with cheese, and a medium fries." And the librarian says, "Son, this is a library." To which the kid replies, "Oh, sorry, I'll have a large Coke." Assembly, Senate President Nick Scuteri and Senator Linda Greenstein in the Senate, co-sponsored by Gordon Johnson. And the synopsis, which is on all of these bills, which I have the reading, makes various revisions to requirements for obtaining a firearm purchaser identification card, permit to purchase a permit to carry a handgun, codifies sensitive places in which firearms and destructive devices are prohibited. I think it's got a little bit more jazz to it than that actual very dry description, but we'll leave it at that. First up to bat is our host mayor, a great mayor, Josh Lasardo of the town. I'm going to do these one letter at a time, I think. Attorney General Matt Plackett. Senate President Nick Scutari. Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin. From the Giffords Law Center, the one and only Jersey guy, Adam Skaggs. We just heard her a minute ago. Please give it up for Shani Knuckles from Monmouth. Nico's not here. Where are you, Nico? Morning, Nico. Nice to see you. Sorry about that. My bad.
I'm short.
Nico Bokor, who's Vice President of State Infrastructure at Giffords. Mallory Nugent, Regional Director of State Affairs for Everytown for Gun. 22? Hey, Joe. 22? Ramya Swamy, who is representing Brady, New Jersey's Executive Committee, is the State Policy Manager. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Stephen Finkel, who's the Director of Legislative Affairs at the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General. I think this is in absentia, is that right? Do you mind giving it to him? All right, thank you, sir. Senator Linda Greenstein, also in absentia. Linda and I exchanged notes earlier. She wanted to be here today. She could not. Will you make sure the senator gets that? Don't take anything off the top there, buddy. We've mentioned him. Actually, I'm going to do Mila first. Let's hear it for Assemblywoman Mila J.C. Last but not least, and I say this again, we've all mentioned his name several times, we wouldn't be here today without Assemblyman Joe Danielson. Joe? I am honored to say that this is now the law of the land.